I'd like to call a surprise witness. Oh, I can't tell you. It'd spoil the surprise.
Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Welcome back to the channel if you've been here before. So, this video is a mix of a book review and a little bit of a discussion that spins off the book. So basically, I've just read a book that utterly floored me. And since reading the book, it stayed in my head. It's been ruminating around my head, traveling around my brain, and it's just not gone away. And it's been almost a week, and it really has left an impression. And it's a very divisive book. So I've seen people say they hate it, or they really didn't like, couldn't get on with it, couldn't finish it. One of my closest friends on BookTube, she recently put that up as one of the worst books of 2024 for her. And I genuinely feel like at the moment it's one of the best books I've read for years. So I really enjoyed it. But it is a book that I can see why some people might just find it too much. And the thing is, if it is too much, and because of the subject matter that's in the book and some of the themes that are in the book and some of the incidents that are in the book, should there be trigger warnings? And I want to talk about trigger warnings once I've talked about the book, and I want to talk about a few other books within the context of trigger warnings as well. And I just want to ask you guys how you feel about trigger warnings, because I'm not wholly sold on them. And anyway, before we get to that point, the book I'm talking about is Suyaka Murata's Earthlings. And I will say straight away that this book cover is really misleading. So this is a very cute cover, and the UK edition in particular is very bright green and very colourful. It looks like a light read. It looks like a bit of fun, and I actually chose this because I'd read two quite heavy books, and I wanted to find a palette cleanser. I wanted to find a book that I could just whiz through, and it wouldn't be too heavy, and then it could set me up to read something else. I just thought that'd be nice, and this was on my radar anyway. And I just read Convenience Store Woman by the same author, and I assumed it'd be like that. I thought it might even be lighter than that because of the cover. It really does make you think. It's a bit of fun. It's a light, fluffy, bit of nonsense. And when I started it, the first couple of chapters, well, not chapters really, because there are only 6 big chapters. So the first couple of scenes, you feel like, oh yeah, this is going to be a light read because it's from the perspective of a young girl. So what I didn't expect was that young girl was going to go through all sorts of things, really, really traumatic things. And she would then respond to that trauma by deciding that she's not an Earthling. She's a magician, and that her cousin, who she has a very, and I don't want to put any spoilers in the video, her cousin, who she's very close to, and feels the same way that she does, they both feel very apart from the norm, apart from society. They don't feel comfortable conforming. And he says that he's not an Earthling, he's an alien. And she's very excited by that her cousin's an alien, and she's a magician, and she uses magic to cover up this trauma. Now she responds to it by her body uses magic to get over the trauma that she suffers, and it's so powerful because it's coming from a child perspective, and the way that it's written, you utterly believe what she's saying, and you can see the horror of what she's experienced, and she's just reacting to it in a really childlike, innocent way, which is even more endearing. But you are shocked at what's happening, and then later on, this idea that she feels utterly removed from normal society, and it kind of gets more compounded as the book goes on. Each chapter compounds this ongoing idea in the book, and by the end of it, the way that she's convinced herself that she isn't an earthling, that she isn't human, and she needs to do other things than what normal people do, ends up in such a shocking last chapter. And I was reading it thinking, oh my God. And I had heard that, oh, you won't believe the ending, or wait till you get to the end, or you're going to be shocked by the ending. So I was waiting for a shock, but yeah, I didn't expect that. And the thing is, I am so glad that I went in blind. So I wasn't completely blind, as in I had read something by that author before, and the themes in the book are similar to the themes in Convenience Store Woman. The thing is, the way that she's dealing with those themes is very different, but the main character in Convenience Store Woman is a woman that feels like she doesn't want to conform with the expectations of a woman. She doesn't want to feel like she has to have a baby and have a husband and all that kind of thing. And that's carried through that book. And it's much more gentle than this one, but she does have a very quirky, unusual way of dealing with it in that book. This is well beyond quirky. This is subversive. This I would suggest that this book is actually subversive, which is why I want to talk about trigger warnings, because the incidents in this book are actually really serious, and her childlike way of narrating it, the way that she tells the story, completely flattens the horrific, grotesque nature of what's happening. So I think that's a very interesting and, for me, compelling literary device to do that, to really suck out all of the horror, if you like, but you are also clearly intelligent and mature enough to know it's horrible, but the way she's describing it is not. So I think that's very clever and it's very powerful. But I didn't get a trigger warning. I'm really glad that I didn't know what was coming next, because it really did make a big difference. I think if I knew what was coming, I think I'd be a little bit more cynical about the book, and possibly a little bit more, a bit more flippant about my reaction to it. But I thought it was really enchanting, even though it was really heavy. So I did wonder if I've been completely desensitized by so many things. I feel like I can read most things and not be upset. There are a couple of things that I find hard, which I'll get to in a minute. But so it seems like sometimes I read something that's been described as disturbing or subversive or transgressive, and I can read it without being too upset or too revolted. So it could be that I've been totally desensitized, I don't know, but I genuinely feel like the way it was written helps me to be okay about what I'm reading, because it's done in such an innocent way. But I really like this book. I thought it was really good, and I want to read everything she's done. She's another, Suyaka Murata is another Japanese female author that I'm going to get into. You've heard me talk about Hiromi Kawakami a lot, and I absolutely love what she does. And she's quite unpredictable, but she doesn't normally go as heavy as this. But this has got some heavy content in it. But I do think the way it's written kind of eases you into it a little bit, in a way, even though it's quite shocking and it's surprising. But I still think the innocent narrative voice does allow for it to be less revolting, I think. So I'm hoping I haven't spoiled anything, because I haven't said anything specific that's happening next. I really do believe that trigger warnings are like spoilers, and I think it's something that I understand why people want them, but I do wonder if the effect that the author is trying to put across to you is going to be completely lost because you had a trigger warning about it, so you're expecting it. And if it's a plot device, or it's an incident in the plot, it's a scene that you know is coming, I'm not really sure that that's best for your experience as a reader. But I understand why people want them, because some people feel like it doesn't matter how well it's written, they won't like the book if it's got certain things in it. I know that Kat from Ginger Bibliophile wants to know in advance about treatment of animals in the books, because she finds that hard. So I do understand it. I personally find the two things that I find hard, and one's quite a vague thing, but it's something that triggers me off a lot. I don't know if I'd ever want a trigger warning about it, but I have son-father issues, which I think I have talked about before. I talked about in the Reading About Reading tag. That was the first time I'd ever talked about it. I struggle when I see films or TV shows where there's a moment between a father and a son that's a bit I don't know, that's getting over some kind of huge narrative point, and they're moving forward in their relationship. I find that so hard because of issues of abandonment and stuff. But also connected to that and connected to him, I can't handle domestic violence either. So I find that hard. But again, I don't know if I want a trigger warning telling me there's going to be some domestic violence in a book. I've avoided one of the Stephen King books that was written because I've heard that there's domestic violence in it. But I do feel like I should read it and then just tackle it. And I don't know that it's good for me as a reader, and especially as a Stephen King fan, to just avoid a book that he's written that some people really like. I think it's Rose Madder. I think that's the one that's got domestic violence in it, because it's got domestic violence in it. I have avoided films that I know are about that. There's a really well acclaimed, very critically acclaimed film called Nil by Mouth, and I've avoided that like the plague. But my wife's seen it, said it's brilliant. But I can't. I could watch it, but I don't watch it. So I understand the idea, but I just feel like I don't know if that completely takes away the experience, and you're avoiding books that you might actually like. I don't know. Tell me in the comments what you think. But I am so glad I didn't get a trigger warning about this, because it was such a shock when these things happened. There's a few things in there that are really quite shocking and subversive. I think that's a subversive book. So just to mention a couple of other things like that. Chokehold by Krista Faust. This is just a hard case crime book that I thought was just a thriller with no unusual content in it, but there's actually a sexual violence in this, and quite explicit sexual scenes in it, which somebody might need a trigger warning for that. But again, because I wasn't expecting it, it was a real shock. As part of the enjoyment of reading it, I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic, but it was such a ride, and it was such a surprise, and I was so shocked by it. And there's these subversive elements in it that I think if I'd have known beforehand, I would have just thought, oh yeah, it's one of those. I don't even know if I'd have read it if it was about that, because I would have just thought it was a bit sensationalist or something. But the way she writes it, it totally works, and you're in there, and you believe in the characters, you're rooting for the characters, even though they are absolutely part of the undergrowth. They are not heroic characters. So that's a good example of that as well. And then one last point about this trigger warning thing. S.A. Cosby's Razor Blade Tears. If there was a warning on the book saying, oh, just to let you know, this book discusses homophobia and racism in this book, because it's two of the main themes in the book, then clearly the people that are homophobic and racist are going to avoid the book. And surely, if that's a thing, if that's like a standard thing that happened on the shelves in this book, for this book, and people didn't buy it or try it because they were like, oh, I don't know if I want to read that, then this book is only going to be preaching to the converted. The only people that are going to be reading this book are the people that are going to go, oh yeah, I agree with everything in the book. And I'm assuming that S.A. Cosby wants to write about homophobia and wants to write about racism because he wants to give that perspective to people that might not have dealt with those things yet, and might have an archaic attitude to those kind of things, and maybe the kind of attitudes that the two main characters have got in this book, you know, they go through a real journey about all that sort of thing, and maybe he wants the reader, some readers, to go through that journey as well. So it's not about preaching to the converted for him. Just saying that if you had warnings about that, then that clearly wouldn't happen. So there we are. So lots of about Earthlings there, but about a few other books there where actually I think that trigger warnings would spoil it. But tell me what you think about that, because I think it's an interesting subject. I think I absolutely get it, totally get it, why people would need a trigger warning for certain things. But for me personally, the big one would be domestic abuse for me because of my childhood. But I don't know if I need a trigger warning about it. I don't know. Maybe I should read this Stephen King book and figure it out and find out if it really was too tough for me. I don't know. I have avoided those films that but I don't know. Maybe it's a bit different when it's in your face in a film, and when your brain is it filters through the brain, and it's like a buffer zone. Like the brain is like a buffer zone with a book. You know, when you're seeing it, it's like you're witnessing it in real life. If you're seeing it in a film, if it's done well. If you're reading it, the words are translate, you know, slightly different possibly, you know, because it's a bit of a buffer zone. I don't know. Tell me what you think below, because I think it's an interesting discussion, and there's no right or wrong about it. There's no right or wrong answer to it. And people are going to feel differently about whether they want trigger warning for certain things, or whether they want trigger warnings at all, or whether they feel like authors are getting readers repelled by trigger warnings, which is not necessarily good. But I personally am so glad I didn't get a trigger warning about this, because I would have already defined it in my head for a start, and then just sort of said, oh, well, I know a bit about that, so I won't read that. And also, it just wouldn't have had the impact that it did. And I think if you are if you're someone that if you feel like you would enjoy some subversive content, really challenging scenes and real surprises, then give this book a go. It's not for everybody, but I really liked it. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, everybody.
Paint me a picture of what it's like to be